Hey folks, it's Brian, and another installment of my Runequest role-playing Glorantha manuscript review. This chapter's on rune magic. The next chapter will be on shamans and spirit worlds, so that might be interesting too. Like I mentioned before, I'm now caught up to where I was reading before, and so it's going a little slower. Making notes off of the data, and probably since this Runequest, I do kind of anticipate folks who are interested in this knowing a little bit about Runequest, so generic details I don't go into. I try to plot the new stuff or things I find interesting or things that I have either confusion or concerns about within the new rules. Okay, so rune magic. Rune magic, you get access to your deity's runic powers by sacrificing your personal power to him or her. The gods get the power, you get access to their spells. That's how it works. An interesting thing that they bring up is more of a flavor sort of thing again, is that as you cast rune magic, you take on the persona of the deity. And so there are a lot of non-game mechanical things that can happen. You can rise inside, your color can change, your appearance can change, lightning can come from your fingertips, that kind of thing. Whatever represents that rune or that deity can be manifest through the caster when they're casting rune magic spells. That's pretty cool. It'd almost be nice to have a mechanic to go with that, but not necessary. Then you go into rune points, and underneath this whole rune point section, something I was hoping to get clarified, a whole difference between initiates and rune level characters. So I do know that the developers, so they mentioned this at GenCon and online and stuff, is that there was a concern initially with Runequest 2 that it took forever, if it was not simply impossible, to play to the rune level so you could play rune stuff. I didn't really have that problem, but then we only played for like one summer. We ran straight Runequest. And in fact, I mentioned this in another video where one of the players had reached a power of 18. And the GM was I think it was the GM. It may have been another of the players. Was trying to convince him that what he needed to do was sacrifice that power to his deity, because normal human beings don't need to have that 18 power. But this guy was a power player, and he wanted to have an 18 power, so his spirit magic was at 90%. Makes sense to me, but I understand also sacrificing power to your deity. And then there's the whole social piece of the cult is saying you need to do this. If you're not going to do this, the cult's going to kick you out. You could have done. Okay, so rune points. First point of power is you sacrifice to your deity or cult. Excuse me. Establishes that magical link between you and your deity. It gives you a rune point. And as you add more power to sacrifice, your rune points go up. No issues there. To do that, well, it doesn't say necessarily just that first one. This is what we're talking about, is underneath that first point of power. But it would make sense that this would go for any point of power sacrifice for rune magic. That it takes a week of meditation and prayer, where you're at the end of that, you sacrifice your power and you get access to spells. I kind of associate it with learning higher sacraments. So there's actually a process for each spell, has their own way of doing things. As an example, they do stipulate again here that the maximum number of rune points you can have per deity, because you can be an initiative more than one, is your charisma. So if your charisma, excuse me, is 10, you're limited to 10 points of rune magic for if you're an initiative Orlanth to Orlanth. And if you're an initiative of Anganagar as well, then you're limited to, again, 10 more points. If it's 20 points of power you can sacrifice between the two deities. Interesting point, I'll get to this later, I think, is that both of them have access to the common spells. You can use either rune point pool for common spells, but you can only use a deity-specific rune point pool for his rune spells, or her rune spells. And in fact, that comes in next. Gaining rune magic spells. So how do these spells work? That first point of power gives you access to all common spells. That's 11. 11 spells for 1 point of power. They go in and talk about how cults have their own special rune magic spells. Usually one or more, usually more than one, but depending upon the size of the deity, and they only have one. That happens. So one or more special rune magic spells that are unique to them, the deity of whatever they are, the runes they're associated with. Excuse me, my nose is starting to run a bit. And for each point of power that you sacrifice, you gain access to one special rune magic spell. And here's where I differentiate with the rules on rune magic is the fact that that first point establishes a connection for 11 spells. You don't need a special rune spell additionally. So that's how I would limit. One of my own home rules would be that first point gives you common. You don't have any special rune magic spells. You need to sacrifice another one if you want a special. Okay, and then it talks about how when you become a rune master, whether that's a priest, a rune lord, or a god talker, that you then have access to the enchantment spells. No real issues there. It's good to go. Okay, for some cults, well, shoot, maybe you're really lucky and you make lots of power gain rolls, and so you get lots of excess power that you don't really need, and so you're sacrificing lots of power to your deity. Good to go. What happens if your deity only has so many spells? One for all the common. Say he's only got 2 specific special rune magic spells for his deity. That's 3. And if you sacrifice 5 points of power, you get 2 more points of power. What happens with those? What do you get with those? Those extra rune point or extra power points simply go into extra rune points in your pool. There's no additional spells. Again, I put in here to myself about when you're sacrificing power, you're gaining access to the knowledge of appropriate invocations for those sacraments for that spell kind of thing. So again, just putting in more religious physical connotation, kind of, how do we relate this kind of thing? That's how I'm thinking of it. And so yeah, you can learn all the spells your deity knows, and all of his associated and all his subcults, and you're still sacrificing more power. It just becomes more points in your pool. Okay, rune points. As I mentioned this earlier, any set of rune points, any pool of rune points can cast common spells because common spells are common on everybody. But special cult rune magic spells, those ones for a specific deity, are cast only for that, from that pool. And then they're stacking. For example, the spell shield. 2 points of armor, 2 points of spirit magic protection, and something else if I remember right. But you can stack that, so you can have, shield 2 or shield 3, which then is 4 or 6 points of protection, right? That's what stacking is, and all the spells they'll list if they're stackable or not stackable. Okay, casting a rune spell during statement of intent, which is part of the whole process. Statement of intent, and then movement, and then action. During statement of intent, you specifically say which spell you're going to cast and who your target is. Then on strike rank 1, which is the first thing that happens every round, you make your roll on your rune affinity for that spell. And some spells have more than one rune affinity. That's okay. You just choose your best one. And you roll. If it's a success, then you spend those rune points. You do an experience check on that rune affinity, and the spell goes off. Pretty standard. If it's a critical, the cost goes to 0 rune points. I like that. If you fail, then you don't expend any rune points. There's no effect. Unless you're boosting the spell with magic points. If you're going to boost the spell with magic points and you fail on your rune magic spell, then you still end up losing 1 magic point. If you fumble your rune affinity roll, there's no effect, but all the rune points you had associated with what you were planning on doing, they all go. They're all spent. Then it talks about resistance roll. Often spells will have a power versus power kind of resistance kind of thing. We all know that. Okay. Incidentary spell effects. Don't remember what I was going to talk about for that. Maybe again that would make sense to me. That again we're talking about. Say you're casting lightning bolt or a sun spear. I remember the picture from the old Runequest 2, the rune probably initiative at that point, casting rune spirit, sun spear, pardon me, at a troll. She's got a hand reaching up to the sun and an arm pointing out to the troll, you know, things like that. Talks again about stackable rune magic, the magical state of stackable, not and things just add up. Okay, here we go. Replenishing rune points. This was something I had a significant concern about because it didn't make a whole lot of sense up front to me about that. But here we go in detail about it. You get to replenish your rune points when you participate in a worship service for a deity at a temple or a sanctified area or a holy place on a holy day. Often that's tied to making a successful worship skill roll. And since you're an initiate or priest, you need to expend 2 magic points for that ceremony. No real issues here. That all makes sense to me. The number of rune points that gets replenished depends on 2 things. Your status as a person, are you initiate or a rune priest, or actually a rune master, being a priest, lord, or god talker, and the type of holy day that you're doing the worship ceremony at. And they've got a table on page 218, which I forgot to get to beforehand. Actually, it's 219. No, it's 218. Okay. And they list off all the different times that you can have these worship ceremonies to replenish your rune points. The first one is sacred time. At sacred time, if you make a successful worship roll, you get all of your rune points back. If you fail, you still get 2d6 back. That's a 7 on average. The example, the quick start rules, everybody's only got 3 points. We're talking about an average of getting 7 back. How much power people anticipating being sacrificed for rune spells? How prevalent are rune spells going to be? Again, this is going to be a whole GM thing on how to try to deal with some kind of balance here on how much magic is being cast. Again, sacred time is once a year, so yeah, there you go. High Holy Day, which is also once a year. Same thing. All rune points are replenished on a successful roll. You get 2d6 back if you fail. Suppose you can say if you fumble, you don't get any back. But you know, that's just me. Seasonal Holy Day. And remember that the campaign turns are seasonal turns. The idea is every season you'll have an opportunity to do some kind of adventuring kind of thing. Go out, spend your rune points, get to the end of the season, you got your seasonal holy day, get your rune points back, right? Well, on a seasonal, you have to make that roll. For an initiate who makes that roll, that's 2d6 for an initiate on a success. For rune masters, on a success, they get all their points back. So here's the first time we differentiate rune point replenishment between initiates and rune masters. On a seasonal holy day, rune masters get all of them back. Initiates get 2d6, just 7 for an initiate back. I don't know if I want to have that much rune magic flying around in my Glorantha world. Minor holy days. The successful worship roll, again, talk about this. Initiates get a d6. Rune masters get a d6 plus 1. How often are minor holy days? I mean, some cults have a holy day every week. Associated cults. If you are doing a worship roll and associated cults holy day, and this is get a d6 and rulers get a d6 plus 1. So an associated cults holy day is the same as a minor holy day. A holy site. If a cult member maintains a holy site, so this is again a campaign kind of thing. You're going to maintain a holy site. You're going to pay for it yourself. So there's a cost involved. And they give you a typical cost here, between 25 and 100 lunar or 200 lunars every season, because you got to maintain it, right? You get a D3 rune points replenished on a successful worship roll. It doesn't really specify when. Just the fact you're maintaining the site at the end of the season. Maybe that's what we do. At the end of the season, I may get this roll. Makes sense. Or if it's a failure, you get 1 point. A votive image. You can request to have a votive image made and placed in your temple. That takes permission from the priest. And there's a cost involved with creating a votive image, between 50 and 100 lunars. But for each votive image you place in a temple, during either a seasonal or a high holy day worship, and you may tie that into the holy site thing too, and that's an idea. During those ceremonies, you get 1 rune point replenished per season per image. So again, if a GM doesn't have tight control over his players, yeah, I'm gonna build 10 votive images. That's 10 points every season. You need that control. Talks about how you can have as many votive images as the priest will allow. And that typically, that takes a temple loyalty skill or passion. Temple loyalty passion roll. You have to make that roll to convince your priest that, yeah, you're good enough to go ahead and pick a votive image. That's how you tie in mechanics to this stuff. Okay, and then they give some examples. They're always giving examples. And again, with examples, they're using the PCs from the Quick Start rules. So it's pretty cool. Most of it, the very beginning, very chapter, they have the Vasana Saga, which is really cool. That talks about what's going to happen during the rest of that chapter. Okay. Still have issues. Excuse me. I still have issues with rune point replenishment for initiates versus rune masters. I guess I'm just too old school. That an initiate sacrifice for 1 use. Do they still maintain the knowledge of those spells that they've learned? Yeah. They just have no power to run them. They need to sacrifice more power for more rune points to do that. Because remember, it only takes 4 points. 4 sacrifice power points turned into rune points to become a priest. 4. We're talking about regaining 7. There's some kind of disconnect here. Didn't mean to get upset. Okay, sacrifice. Sacrifices are used. Okay, during your holy days and high holy days, when you're trying to replenish your rune points, you have to make those worship generally. You need to make those worship skill rolls, right? Well, how can you increase your chances of making that skill roll? By making sacrifices, right? I mean, that's why we slaughter bullocks and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, during normal worship services, everybody sacrifices 1 magic point. That's part of the service, right? Initiates and rune masters sacrifice 2. That's part of the ceremony. Well, for every magic point over that 2 that you sacrifice, if it's 3, 4, or 5, and on average you've got 10, right? On average, an average person has a power of 10, so they've got 10 magic points. You spend 2, that's 8 more magic points. Now you could say that if you go to magic point 0, you go unconscious, and nobody's going to do that. So that's 7. 7 more magic points that you can sacrifice during the ceremony to increase your worship skill. And that's plus 10% per magic point over. So that's plus 70 on average. A normal person could sacrifice. Because these magic points, you're going to get them back in a day. I don't know. So what's a person's average worship or length, whatever their deities, each deity's got their own worship skill. What's the average skill for an initiate or a rune master? Their worship skill should be big. Should be at least 75%. Maybe not for initiate 50 to 75. Rune master should be at least a 75%. And I don't remember now, but there's probably a point we're talking about, requirements. You have a worship skill at certain levels. And for priests, it's probably 90%, maybe 50, maybe 50, and then rune lords were 9%. I'm trying to remember some of the stuff from previous episodes. But still, 50% plus 70%. I've got 120% chance to make sacrifice. What are my odds of being successful? Still 95, because a 96 double is always a failure, right? It just makes it seem way too easy to get way too many magic points back. We're talking about, a seasonal turn. But still, just seems way too easy to get way too much back. Okay, you can sacrifice living things. They're not talking people. Talk about animals, food, wine, that kind of stuff, right? And they got a little table there about what a small offering is, what a medium offering is, what a large offering is. You get plus 5, 10, or 20, depending upon small, medium, or large. Same with valuable objects, small, medium, large value, 5, 10, or 20% bonus. Sacred dates. If it's a weekly special date or a minor special date, plus 10%. If it's a seasonal, which is that once a year thing, 2 weeks in the year everybody goes to, plus 20%. If it's seasonal, pardon me, it's a seasonal. There's a seasonal holy day every season. If it's that seasonal holy day, you get plus 20%. If it's a high holy day, which is once a year, or it's that sacred time, which is once a year, it's plus 40. Plus 40, plus 70, plus 111, probably 110, push base of 50, but it's 160%. Way too easy to get way too much back. I just don't quite get it, what they're trying to do here, and I am gonna have to tweak that stuff. Okay, sacred places. If you do it, sacred places being temples. If you're just doing it at a holy site or shrine, no bonus. But if you're going to a temple, if it's a minor temple, plus 10. If it's a major temple, plus 20. If it's a greater temple, plus 30. Again, this will depend upon your deity and your location. But generally, if you're talking about, a seasonal holy day, you're going to make a pilgrimage, right? I mean, I would. To at least a minor temple, if not a greater temple. Again, this is going to come back to GM control, where these things are. How many do you have? Where are they located? High holy day. Oh, shoot, even seasonal. Seasonal holy day, 20%. Greater temple plus 3, that's 50%. 7 magic points. Well, I forgot what it was. Seasonal's 20, greater's 30, it's 50. Seasonal's 20, 120. And your base 50%, 170% every season. Just kind of generalized kind of stuff. Way too easy. Okay, now you talk about one-use rune spells, because there are some spells, they're specified one use only. This is another thing that kind of throws me off. The rune points that you use to cast that one-use spell cannot be replenished. They're taken off, period. The rune points, the connection you have to your god are gone because you've cast the spell. Doesn't mean the spell's gone. It didn't say anything about losing knowledge of the spell. That's how I would treat it. You lose the knowledge of the spell, so you need to sacrifice again for that spell. But according to this, you just lose the rune points. So if you get your 7, since you're getting back on average 7 of these things, I'm not quite following the logic behind the mechanics on this one. Sorry. Okay. I flipped through I was at my son's soccer game yesterday, and during halftime and before the game, I was working on my notes. And it was at halftime. We're getting close to the guys come back out to play again. So I'm flipping through the list of all the rune magic spells. And there's a lot of new rune magic spells. There are. That's something that's really been added to a lot here. There are 4 that I found that are one use. Alter Creature, which is a permanent spell. Call Founder. Gnome to Gargoyle. Just taking an earth elemental and turning it into a gargoyle. Interesting spell, one use. And then Seal Soul. Didn't really read, because that's, like I mentioned, I was running out of time. I didn't read into what that was, but it's 4 one-use spells. Resurrection is not a one-use spell. Is death, Pretty significant Runequest. Happens quite a lot. Very easy to happen. Yeah, I agree. Resurrection needs to be a spell we have access to. But are we resurrecting people that often? I don't know. I personally would have made resurrection one use. But again, I wouldn't have them sacrifice all the rune points they were putting into that thing gone. I just lost the knowledge of that spell, the knowledge of the requirements for that sacrament. You know, what it takes to do that spell is gone. So you have to re-sacrifice for it. That would give my players more a larger pool of rune points. But you know, I don't know. That's something I have to play with. I have to play with this one. See where I want to try and get that balance out. Okay, characteristics of rune spells. Generically, rune spells are passive, last 15 minutes, and have a 160-meter range. Now, there are some spells that are a little different, and it will specifically say in there what those differences are. And characteristically, rune magic spells are twice as strong as spirit magic spells. So, like Protection 1 is 1 point, Shield 1 is 2 points. If you want to block, you want to counter magic, 1 point of rune magic, it takes 2 points of spirit magic to counter block it, or counter magic it, you know, that kind of thing. Pretty standard. Okay. As I mentioned, there's that whole list of rune spells and a whole bunch of new ones. But like I mentioned, there's a whole slew of deities that I'd never heard of before in this book. They've got cults for, and so they've got to have the rune magic for us. Okay, well, this one ran a little bit long. Apologize. And I know there were a lot of dead spots because I'm just not quite comprehending what the designers were thinking on some of this stuff. Maybe they want to make it easier, funner to play. And again, you know, the rule of thumb for playing is it needs to be fun, and I agree. But I don't know, maybe I'm just too harsh, too old school. That, you know, limitations. I just don't want that much rune magic flying around. It just seems way too easy to get way too much. But my 2 cents. But hey, that's the rune magic section. The next section is shamans in the spirit world. See when I get that one done. Ciao.